How about talking to Larry Kudlow, National Economic Council Director, who was
never anything but positive.
On Squawk a few moments ago, got cut off a little bit. Larry, thanks for joining us again.
My great pleasure. Thank you. Thank Jimmy. Appreciate it, fellas.
Larry, one thing you guys didn't get to with the Squawk crew was China and specifically ag. Can you talk about that 40 to 50 number and the degree to which this is actually going to happen?
Well, that was something that was agreed upon. I think it's a real number. It's not, by the way, just going to be ag purchases, although that's going to be a huge boost to our farm sector. There are also going to be various market access openings with respect to agriculture products and agriculture standards that the Chinese seem to be loosening up on. It'll be a great pleasure. So that's a huge piece of it. It's not the only piece, but between the market openings, they're lowering non-tariff barriers on agriculture. And by the way, they started buying. You know, I believe I was on CNBC when I said maybe 10 days ago that people shouldn't be so pessimistic about the China talks and that some good things could happen. And I think this whole phase one is a good thing that's happening. And for the skeptics out there, I appreciate that and I respect that. But I'm telling you, there's a lot of momentum and there's agreement on both sides.
Larry, Jim, great that you're having you back. Thank you for coming back.
My pleasure, Jimmy. You know, can I read, Jim? I just want to read this. It came out, I believe, yesterday morning. This is from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Okay, so that's the top of the heap. It's like our State Department. Here's what they said, and I say this to the doubters. Here's what the Foreign Ministry said. The two sides are unanimous in the issue of reaching an economic and trade agreement. There is no difference. This economic and trade agreement will be of great significance to the United States and the rest of the world, global economy, and world peace. In other words, the two sides are unanimous in the issue of making an economic and trade deal. Now, that's from the Foreign Ministry, a very important part of the Chinese government infrastructure. We've never had a statement like that, Jimmy, from them. Never. So I think all the phase one subjects I hope we get into, this is for real. For real.
Well, look, I waited, and I sure hope it happens because they let the United States down after Argentina. Let's go back to strong versus weak economy. Yeah. Larry, I've got to tell you, the manufacturing economy needs help. It needs a rate cut, and it needs a rate cut now, maybe 2 rate cuts. But the consumer, the numbers yesterday from retail, from commerce, indicated weakness. I have a good read on the consumer from both the banks and from retailers that says it's strong. What do you say to the people who say, listen, we're a consumer-led economy. Why do we need these rate cuts?
Well, look at, I'm getting anecdotal evidence. One of the lovely parts of my job is I get to meet a lot of CEOs on a constant basis. Industry, pharmaceuticals, drugs, bankers. They have a bird's eye view. One of the things I've heard from the big bankers, loans are booming, Jimmy, particularly middle market loans. I've heard that several times. So that's a terrific thing. And I really don't see, I know the retail sales number was sloppy, but if you smooth it out on a 3-month change, it's growing about 5% at an annual rate. That's a good number. On manufacturing, no question, the GM strike has hurt us. The Boeing problem has hurt us. The absence of demand from Europe has really hurt us a lot. But I will say this, pardon the numbers, but the third quarter is actually coming in positive. Manufacturing in Q3 looks like it'll be up 3.1% at an annual rate. In Q2, it was a negative number, and business equipment, which is important for investment and capital spending, Q3 2.1, Q2 was -5. I think, Jimmy, if you look at that, you look at the housing improvement, You look at the strong retailers, and look, let's not forget, you got a 3.5% unemployment rate, 50-year low, with revisions last month, payrolls 180. That's a huge number. And households, and I want to emphasize households, which pick up smaller business, the last 4 months or the last 5 months, the household survey from which unemployment comes, that thing's been growing 400,000 per month. So
but Larry,
America's working and America's getting paid. I think we are in an improving situation.
I know, but I listen. If I were Jay Powell, Fed chief, I would say that there's no reason to cut. And yet you and I both know that if we're going to remain competitive, particularly with the dollar the way it is, then there must be a cut. How do you rationalize a cut given all that great news you just said?
Well, look, the great news may be more of a forecast. I don't know. The actual numbers, I think, still in the third quarter. You know, it's going to be a softer quarter than we hoped. The money markets are predicting another rate cut. Jim Bullard of the St. Louis Fed, who was a thought leader, he's really been kind of a leading indicator of the Fed. He wanted 50 basis points cut last month. He got 25. I think he's pushing for 25, maybe even 50 the end of this month. So, Jimmy, I'm just saying the markets are telling me at least, you know, you and I used to do this a lot in the good old days. The markets are predicting another Fed rate cut, and I agree with that. I think it would be entirely appropriate. One last point on the Fed before we get too far into the weeds. The yield curve is now finally beginning to normalize. A month ago, every media outlet, including media outlets that never heard of the yield curve before, were all predicting recession because the curve went negative and short rates were above long rates. That's changed now, as you know. Now the 10-year is above the 2s and above the 3-month bill. That's a good sign. My reckoning is monetary policy will go at least for one more 25-point ease. And as you put it, I think it's worthwhile. I think it's a good thing.
Hey, Larry, really quick, just a couple of things from me. This remarkable meeting last night between the Speaker and the President in the Cabinet room, does that bury any hopes of USMCA?
Well, you know, Carl, I don't think so. Now, I was not at that meeting. I've been at many other meetings. Some are good, some are not so good. Look, what I'm hearing, Speaker Pelosi has her disagreements with the administration. No question about that. I understand that. She has them. Having said that, Speaker Pelosi has been accommodative and accessible and helpful regarding USMCA, which is a big boon for farmers, manufacturers, high-tech, financial services, currency stability. It would increase American economic growth by 0.5% of GDP and a couple of 100,000 jobs over time. So I think, Speaker, on that subject, even while she disagrees on others, I think she's been helpful. My friend, Trade Ambassador Bob Lighthizer, is working the Hill Democratic side. Senior key Democrats are heavily engaged with Ambassador Lighthizer, talking about key issues. And so many people in the Democratic and Republican Party understand that USMCA, which is a template for future trade deals, would be a legacy, a great legacy for the United States, a great legacy for Republicans and Democrats and workers and manufacturers and automakers and content. This is such a big thing. I still believe it will pass. We may have disagreements on some matters, but I think USMCA has a lot of momentum. I think it will pass, and I think it will pass before before Thanksgiving. That's my own personal view.
Larry, you're making a lot of news. A lot of people feel that the spat between Speaker Pelosi and President Trump is irredeemable. You're obviously saying that's not the case. You're also saying that we should stay tuned for some buys. Maybe even they open up a J.P. Morgan or a city to open business in China. Larry, these would be two incredibly bullish things. Just want to be sure that that's what we heard, that that's what you're saying, because they're both very newsworthy.
Number one, let me repeat. The Trump administration, the president may have his disagreements with Speaker Pelosi. This is not unusual. But I still believe on USMCA. That's a separate track. And I will just tell you, high-level conversations with senior Democratic committee chairs and sub-chairs are talking to Ambassador Lighthizer, who has conducted, Mr. Lighthizer has put together a brilliant, nonpartisan trade deal that helps manufacturing and farmers. It also helps the new economy with IP protection. It also includes currency stability. This is a template. This is an American legacy. Second point, Jimmy. You were asking me what about China?
Yes.
China.
I wanted something new. I mean, maybe it's something like an ag buy, but also say letting J.P. Morgan in, letting Citi in. Let us compete, Larry. They won't let us compete.
You are correct. Now, here's a very important point. We have made great progress, and this is a key part of phase one. And this goes back to last spring. Treasury Secretary Mnuchin had successfully negotiated financial industry openings in China so that the ownership of any joint ventures will switch to an American majority. You follow me? Instead of 49%.
Sure.
All right. So if an insurance company or a bank or a securities firm gets a license from the Chinese government and enters into a joint venture or something like that, instead of owning 49%, that number will go to 51, 53, and 100% ownership in a couple of years. Vice Premier Liu Hu has been talking about this for many months. Not only is that provision still on the table, Jimmy, it's gaining favor, that whole chapter on financial services. The currency, transparency, and stability, that chapter has gained great credibility. The protection of international property rights, that chapter has gained great credibility. This will go on. Phase one may not be altogether finished. All right, you may go to phase two on some areas, but on things like conflict resolution, it's being dealt with at the highest levels of the U.S. and China, the highest levels. And there is a desire and a willingness. I read this foreign ministry statement. I urge you all to get a hold of it and look at it yourselves, and you will see. Now, I cannot predict the future here. All I'm saying is, take phase one seriously. I said on this network a week or 10 days ago that we might be surprised at what came out of these talks last week. We are surprised at what came. Both sides have a desire to do business. It's got to be the right deal. It's got to be right for America. President Trump says that all the time. It's got to be enforceable. There has to be ways to deal with disagreements and resolutions. But nonetheless, this is front and center. It's going back to China. We're going to put the papers and the documents and the translations together. Maybe it will be signed in APEC in Chile by the middle of next month. Maybe not. But the momentum, the issues, they're all on the table. Both sides have agreed. In other words, Jimmy Cramer, we have come further than we ever have before, So the president lifted one of the tariffs. We'll see about other tariffs being lifted. That might be part of the deal. I don't want to make a prediction. But both sides see this as beneficial for each country. And that is enormous progress. As I said a while back, the mood music has improved. Now the actual negotiation has improved. These are tough guys. This is tough negotiations. The president will always defend America. No question about that. He will always defend our economy. But people shouldn't overthink this. This is real, and it's going to be negotiated.
Before we let you go, Larry, while we've been talking industrial production, for negative year-on-year, first in 3 years, some of that may be GM. But you did say in May that the American economy, you said we were killing it with the economy. Are you still saying that today?
Well, look, we've had some softness in the spring and summer quarters. Again, the aftermath of severe monetary tightening, the slump in Europe, the strikes at GM, I'm not going to call it a strike, but the problems in Boeing, that stuff cuts into manufacturing. But if you look, Carl, I don't want to go through the numbers again. The third quarter as a whole, if we smooth these things out, manufacturing will be positive in the third quarter. It was negative in the second quarter. Business equipment, positive in the third quarter. It was negative in the second quarter. I like the low interest rates. I like the zero inflation. I also like low taxes. Consumer incomes are booming right now, and so are jobs. So I will say I'm looking for a big improvement in Q4, and I'm looking for a continued economic boom in 2020.
Larry, let me ask you, yesterday Mark Benioff was on. You know him from Salesforce. He's talking about capitalism being dead. The other night there was a Democratic, let's say a referendum by candidates which said that capitalism is dead, but they need to have something else replace it. One wants government to replace it. We know what that is, the Democrats. The other one wants business replacement. Is capitalism dead, Larry?
Capitalism is not dead. Free enterprise is not dead. Economic opportunity and freedom is not dead. Look, in another interview, which I would love to do with you fellas, we can talk about some of these policies coming out of the Democratic side. I don't want to do politics, but I love to do policy. I will just say this. The president said this at the UN. He will never permit the United States to become a socialist country. He will never permit the government's takeover of health care. He will never permit a rollback of energy and fossil fuels, which has not only created jobs, it has made America so strong in the international arena. We will never have the kind of government that actually encourages people not to work and pays them not to work. There is no way Americans are going to vote for plans that would be a government takeover of the economy with a price tag of $100 trillion or more, which would be paid for by enormous increases of middle-class taxes. That's the only way you can do that. This is not the American way. We are free enterprise. We are not socialists. We are going to protect a tremendous, durable economic prosperity cycle with low taxes and deregulation and energy and getting trade barriers down. Socialism is in Venezuela. Socialism is in China. Socialism is in a lot of places around the country. Jimmy Cramer, you and I started as partners on TV, I don't know, 20 years ago. We didn't talk socialism then. We ain't talking socialism now. America loves freedom. And a government-dominated repressive economy is not freedom. And by the way, why? Why? Creating a 3.5% unemployment rate with median income $65,000. It's up about $6,000 or $7,000 in 2 years. Why would we want to destroy a pretty darn good prosperity cycle? Why would anybody in their right mind want to do that? No. Socialism, X. Check the box for
Larry.
Check the box.
I like the old
check
days.
the box for free enterprise, Jimmy Cramer. Check the free
bet,
enterprise
Larry.
box, and wealth creation in the stock market benefits. 100 million people. I could go on and on. Maybe we'll have
yes,
our
you
own
could.
session.
It's like the old days. We agreed.
We can't wrap you anymore, Larry, like we did in the old days, but we can thank you.
Thank
See
you,
you soon.
Larry.
Larry Kudlow, outside the White House.